Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the Shrewsbury Biscuit podcast. I'm your host, Alex Whiteley. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Joining us today is a very local, fantastic TV chef, and that's Marcus Bean. Thank you very much for joining us, Marcus.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No. I think the last time I sort of had not dealings with, that sounds the wrong way to it. Last time I had dealings with you, the last time I saw you working with something local was the Shropshire Virtual Festival. There you go. That's what we're doing. And I was made aware of you, and I kind of, I need to get this guy in the biscuit. But that was like right sort of towards the beginning of
that was the first lockdown, wasn't it? I think.
That was crazy. And I've got to say, even today, I'm flabbergasted and really impressed with that virtual show, because it was just a fantastic effort by the guys that run that. I'd like to discuss your career. Sort of how does someone who's self-professed, sort of self-taught chef end up on the TV? How does that happen?
Where do you want me to start?
Well, let's start from a young Marcus Bean. What's that like for you? What's the inspiration, the thing that makes you want to get in the kitchen and cook from a young age?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sort of the typical norm, the sort of Jamie Oliver who always wanted to cook and always did cooking as a kid. It was never really me. The one comparative I do have was we both grew up in pubs. So Jamie grew up in a pub, so did I. I've lived in pubs since I was the age of 5. So my mum and dad were both, my mum was a chef by trade and my dad's a licensee. And that's where it progressed, but that was down in sort of Henley-on-Thames area around Oxfordshire. And we used to have Breakspear's pubs. So a lot of the time when we had our pubs, and the 3 that we had down there we used to live in a flat above, so we didn't have, a normal sort of standard at home kitchen. We had a domestic kitchen. Sorry, we had a commercial kitchen, not a domestic kitchen. And that, for me, never allowed me to go in the kitchen because the pub was open 7 days a week. It was closed for a brief hour and a half in the afternoon. And then the only other time it was quiet and was empty was sort of like 12 o'clock at night until sort of 8 o'clock in the morning. So I didn't really get involved as a kid in cooking. I never needed to, never wanted to. Like I say, we had a flat upstairs which had a lounge and a bathroom, and that was pretty much it. And then outside was a pub garden. But I used to do more really in the cellar with my dad. So it was like tapping barrels, stocking the shelves, that sort of stuff. So, nice. But the one advantage I did have was my mum, obviously, whenever we had dinner, because she was always working, was always a case of, what do you want for tea? Here's a menu. There's the specials board. And it was literally a selection. And that was for me and my sister from the age of 5, really. So, we did have a choice of, steak, 3 types of steak, beef pies, chicken dishes, casseroles. We had everything we wanted, and dessert menus and whatever. Diet Coke on tap, chocolate bars behind the bar, all that sort of stuff. So we ate very well. So I was always around food from day one. And the only reason I really got into, sort of cooking as such was, we moved to Shropshire when I was 17. My parents took on a pub called what was the Burlton Inn many years ago. It was their first freehold pub because my mum's originally from Malpas. So we moved up here, and I had the choice. I was actually a pig farmer at the time. And she said, do you want to, will you come up with us? I had the choice of either staying down south, trying to find myself somewhere to live on pittance of a wage with my little moped, going to work at 6 a.m. to go and feed the pigs. And I just thought, I'm going to move up. So I did. So I moved up and I helped them set up the pub. We renovated it. And I started working for them, and then progressively just did lots of different things. My wife, Jenny, we've been together for quite a long time. I can't remember quite how long now, a very long time. And we have 3 gorgeous children, but she came work at the pub when we first started there. And we went off and did our own things. We worked in sort of management. I did everything from, I studied sound engineering in Manchester because I always wanted to go into the music industry. And then we had an opportunity to get a pub. And that's where it sort of started. So we took on a pub called the New Inn at Basschurch, and it was a very rundown pub. It was pretty rough, to say the least. So we had to renovate that, and we did that it took us about 2 months all in all. And then we opened, and my parents had the same pub at the same time. So we opened and were literally thrown straight in. We had a mass. It was exceptionally busy. We were full, lunchtimes, dinners. I mean, it was just non-stop. And this is, going back sort of, we've been here sort of 8 years. So this is sort of 16 years ago, probably a bit longer actually than that. And it was incredible. We employed a team, we employed chefs, and myself and my wife can both cook, but very basic. Like if I had a house, I'd cook a barbecue. I could just about cook my own steak. That was my limit. So we had to employ a team of, chefs and front of house, and we could help out, but we were never capable of running a kitchen. And we employed a chef, and to cut a long story short, he was an absolute nightmare. He caused us a lot of issues, a lot of problems, everything. Well, I could write a book in the whole year of what we had. We had more stuff happen in the first year of trading than my parents had in 35 years of being in the business. And that gives you a bit of an insight into how full on it was. I mean, we'd taken on a village pub, we'd converted it. So there was a lot of difference in opinions and animosity. But at the same time, it was exceptionally busy and we had to manage that. So we had a real nightmare and we just came away from it. And we had a rare moment of being out for a day, and we went, one of us has got to go in the kitchen. We've got to do this. We've got to take a hold of the kitchen. And I said to Jenny, I said, well, do you want to do it? And she went, no. And I went, right, okay, well, I'll do it. That's fine. I'll do it. And I literally, from that moment on, just put my head down. I read a lot of books. I read a lot of studies of sort of catering college books, La Rose Gastronomique, which is sort of a classic French, almost Bible of cooking. I watched a lot of telly. But I was in a very good position because I had my own kitchen, my own business. I had a local farm around the corner that wasn't actually a farm shop at that time, called Moore Farm. And I could just develop my own skills and practice and learn. And I just did that. And over time, it just got better and better and better and progressed. And that's where it started. But like I say, it was out of a necessity rather than a passion of wanting to always do it.
You had to over-adapt to survive. And out of that came this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the interesting thing. And, this is the same sort of situation where I think a lot of people are in now. And I think we've always got to adapt, whatever industry we're in. Food and hospitality as an industry is exceptionally hard. The margins are really low. People go into it, have this pipe dream of running a pub, running a restaurant. Oh my God, it's going to be amazing. I'll have all this and I'll have that and I'll have a flash cut. It doesn't work like that. It just doesn't, because at the end of the day, you work ridiculous hours. It's been compared to sort of, junior doctors who are putting in the same amount of hours. And it's not always seen by the customer because you're behind the scenes. So you get comments on, oh, well, have you been there? You had a day off. And no, actually, I've been working the cellar for 6 hours. It's that element. So it's a real high pressured environment, but it's also exceptionally high pressured in terms of, when there's someone in front of you and they want something and it's there and you've got, 50 covers or 60 covers in front of you, you've got that pressure. You've got to get it on. You're a time frame. There's no, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it later. It's high intensity, high pressured environment. And we learned to adapt to that. And I think that's where, we just sort of, I fell into it. And I've always loved food. I think that was the background. And then I just got better and better. And it was a random one really with TV, come back to the original question, because I didn't want to do TV in any way, shape or form. I was just, we were just running the pub. And I suppose at that time there was always MasterChef and things, but there wasn't really much else.
Ready, steady, cook.
yeah, exactly. Ready, steady, cook, which everybody's watched, all that sort of stuff, which is great, and I've never really been in that situation where, like I said, I wanted to do anything. I can't remember what it was. I think I got to a point of where I'd been cooking in the kitchen. I'd done a lot of hours and I was pretty knackered. And I just thought, something popped up and it was this thing called Iron Chef. And I'd seen this sort of application online. And I went, what is Iron Chef? It sounds a bit like nutty. And at the time I was thinking about, I had to get myself out of the kitchen to do some more exercise, because I became a bit of a, bear in mind I was in the kitchen from sort of 7 a.m. till sort of 1 to 2 at night. I'm cleaning up, I'm scrubbing the floors, and, you come out of there at like 12 o'clock midnight sweating, and Jenny's like, do you want to come to the customer's house? Do you know what? I just don't. Just sometimes you get to that point where you become a little bit of it's a hard environment, put it that way.
I imagine.
So I ended up sort of thinking, what can I do to get myself out? I sort of signed up to the Great North Run. I did these little things. And one of the things I'd seen was this Iron Chef. And I was like, what is that? So I Googled it and I saw this like weird sort of American version and a Japanese version of these chefs in like this big stadium running around like lunatics, chopping up big fish and meat and vegetables and like cooking stuff up. And I was like, okay, that sounds a bit, because I didn't know whether it was like an Ironman challenge or a triathlon. I wasn't quite sure. So I said, I'll have a go. Anyway, I did the application. And then I think I was sitting down at 12 o'clock at night with Jenny doing it after we closed the pub. And I started doing it. And then I realized it was like 4 pages or 5 pages long. I got to the first 2 pages and I went, I can't be bothered. The application had closed the day after. So I just said, I'm not going to bother doing it. So I left it. And then about 3 days later, I had a phone call on my mobile from the production company because I filled in my details. And they just said, "Hi, I've just noticed you've done this application but haven't filled it in, haven't completed it." I was like, "Yeah, I'm really sorry." I said, "I just ran out of time, didn't want to do it." And they were like, "Oh, do you have a chat?" And I was like, "Okay, well, just give me a minute. I'm in service." So I was doing lunch while chatting to them on the phone. And they just said, "Look, would you fancy coming for like a screen test? There's loads of people who are doing it. We're traveling around the country." And it was Aston Villa football ground. And they said, "Would you come and do like you need to cook us 2 dishes, on camera, being filmed with other people in the kitchen." And I said, "Yeah, I'll give it a go. Why not?" So I did. And I went and did it. And that was the first time I'd ever cooked for anybody out of my own kitchen, like ever. And I think I did like a turbot dish. I did like a posh fish and chips, basically like a turbot, like aluminium, so butter and all that stuff, lovely little French fries. And they did a little sort of video of me and took it. And then they gave me a call a couple of weeks later and said, "Look, we'd love to invite you to come and do the show." So it was all filmed in Glasgow. So I was a bit like, "Oh, okay, right. How do I do this?" So I managed to cover the kitchen and get myself out. And I spoke to Jen, and Jen was like, "Just go and do it. You've got nothing to lose." And it got me out of the kitchen, which I think is why she probably pushed me to do it.
Off you go.
Yeah, exactly. Get out, go and do something different. So I did. So I flew up to Glasgow. I got off a plane. I remember getting in a taxi they'd congregated us all together to go to the hotel. And I was getting this taxi, and I was like, "Oh, hi, I'm Marcus." And they were like, "Yeah, this guy was from Birmingham, and he had like 3 restaurants." There was another guy who was a professional chef. He had a restaurant himself. Another one who worked really. And I got to the hotel when I checked in. I phoned to Jenny. I think I'm out of my depth here. I said, like, there's 3 or 4 people that are all going to be my group that are, obviously really good professional chefs. I'm not. I'm self-taught. I've been cooking for like 8 or 9 months at this time, I think. I don't know. She went, "Just go and do it. See what you do." Anyway, we went in, and you have an ingredient each day. And it was like, there was 4 of us competing against the hierarchy chefs. So one of them was Tom Aitkins, who's just been awarded another Michelin star in his restaurant. A guy called Martin Blunos, who at his peak had 2 stars. Sanjay Devi, Judy Dew, and a couple of others. And at the time, all of the judges were food critics. So they were all like editors, Delicious Magazine, BBC Good Food. Ollie Smith was the host. Now, Ollie Smith, the wine guy, sat in the kitchen. Nick Nairns. I mean, it was just, everybody was involved. Everybody foodie was involved in the show.
Pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And I carried on. I kept doing it anyway. I kept winning. So I won my section each day. And you get these like little stars and your badges. And it came through that I got through, and I ended up getting through to the final. So I had to go back home, work for like a week and a half, fly back out 2 weeks later to do the final. And there was only 2 people who won the whole show. It was like they did like 3 or 4 series. Me and another guy called I can't remember his name now. He's a good French chef, and he Frank Pontaine is his name. And me and him are the only 2 winners in the whole show. Anyway, went out Channel 4. Did this thing, won it, went back to carry on working at the pub, and I think it came out like 6 months after. But the show was not a massive success. It wasn't what it was. It was very fast paced. It was a bit too full on. It was like on at like 6 o'clock. It was a bit like trying to watch Come Dine With Me, like Ninja Warrior. It needed to be later type thing. So it wasn't. Anyway, it didn't quite work. But out of that, I just sort of came away from it, and I went, "Do you know what? Like, I didn't get a lot from it. There wasn't really publicized. I didn't have much publicized locally about it. It was just one of those things I won, and I didn't win any money for it. And I just thought, actually, I'm gonna try and pursue that. I really enjoyed it, and then I just pushed it. So I got myself an agent. I approached someone, had a chat with them. They went, "Yeah, I think there's potential to do bits." And then I just kept pushing. And I went for an interview with ITV for This Morning. Did a screen test. And then I think it was probably about 9 months later, after I'd had my screen test, they came back and said, "Oh yeah, I'd love you to come on the show." And I said, "Well, do you want me to do a screen test again?" I went, No, we've already done that. We've got it in the files. Just come on. So I was like, bang, and straight into the show with Holly and Phil. And I did that for about a year. And then I've just done lots of other stuff from there. And I was probably one of the only chefs that had a contract for a year to do. So I was doing it sort of every fortnight, I suppose, going and cooking on that. But that's like 7 odd years ago, maybe even more than that now, 7, 8 years ago. It's crazy how this time flies. And then just kept in that loop. So just I'm involved in bits and bobs. But, I've done all sorts of stuff from pilots to everything else, really.
I don't. Okay, so traditionally, I don't tend to watch terrestrial TV. I'm a box setter. I watch Netflix and stuff. So I don't watch I don't watch daytime TV as much as most people, but I have obviously all week I've been watching your shows on This Morning, watching back bits that you've done, and I've got to say, what I do when I research my guests and things, I put myself in their position in certain scenarios, and one of them is cooking live on TV. It looks, oh my God, it looks haunting. Like just how difficult it can be and how easily it can go wrong. How is it adapting to that arena?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably slightly different to most in the way that I absolutely love live TV. I love doing things on the moment. I love being under that pressured environment. That's sort of how I thrive. Like if you ever watch me do a cookery demonstration for any shows or events, I'll generally, people go, "Oh, what are you cooking before?" I don't really know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, I've just got few ingredients. So I'll bring a bit of risotto rice. I'll bring a bit of this, a bit of that. I might have some grains and pulses that I've got ready. I might have some meat. I might have some really good partridge. I might have some fantastic vegetables that come out of the garden. Everything is very sort of, on the cuff in terms of cooking. And I've always been like that. And then I'll go on stage and I'll, if there's local suppliers, I'll grab some few items. And even on stage, I'll go like, people go, "What are you going to cook?" And I'll go, "Well, I'm going to do this." And that's how I thrive. So I work really well with it. It's a completely different ball game. I mean, I had an element of it. The thing is, when you're filming, obviously with the filming of Iron Chef, the one advantage was when that clock went, you had to carry on cooking. There was no stopping. It wasn't like filming a series. Now, if I was to go and do like a pilot or a TV series, we'd start doing something. They'd go, "Right, so that's one section." So one section might be getting the camera on a close-up, chopping the onion, and then it stopped for a couple of minutes. Bang, right. Then the next section is going to be a close-up of the pan. So you do it in stages. And again, also talking to camera. Live is very different. So you are on the moment. Now, the one thing that's very different with something like This Morning is, of course, This Morning is a set run product. So it has a certain amount of time frame that it has to run. It can't run over that period. That's their window. So what they're very clever at doing, in the producers and the directors, is they have to have everything in that. So they'll plan all the time slots very cleverly throughout the day, because what you can't judge is how things go, or if something goes over slightly. So it ends up being cut and chopped. So I remember doing my first one and it was like, right. I said, "Well, how long do you normally get then?" "Oh, well, they said like about 8 minutes, that's sort of like, I'm like, "Oh, okay, 8 minutes. How many dishes do you want me to?" "Oh, like 3 in 8 minutes. Oh, okay." Right. So how do I do this? So we have a home economist who's exceptionally good. Home economists are fantastic in terms of how they set things up, and they're very clever because they know how the show works. And so every program you ever see or every live event always has a home economist behind who knows exactly what they're doing. So I send in recipes. We then plan those recipes. We plan stages of the recipes. So if I was doing, for example, a quiche, let's say, one stage would be having the raw ingredients in front of me measured, which I could then show mixed together. And then, of course, I'd then go, right, that goes to there. Then I bring out the pastry that's already chilled. I've got another one there. Then I have another one that's like sort of put into a tin. And then I'll have a tin that's there. And then I'll have a tin that's blind baked. So I'll have probably 5 or 6 stages of things done. Then we'll have a quiche that's already finished to come out. So it's very time frame. But I remember the first one I ever did was like, how long have you got? "Oh, you got 6 minutes for your shot today." "No problems." "Great. Okay, that's fine. I can do that." It was a quiche and it was a nice salad and it was something else. And then just before I was due to go on, they went, "Oh yeah, because the last slot ran over, you've now got 4 minutes." And I went, "Oh, okay." And then they said, "Just bear in mind as well, like when you're chatting, you'll probably have about a minute of chatting to Holly and Phil, because they'll come in, they want to chat to you before you get cooking." So actually, in reality, I had 3 minutes to do 3 dishes. And I just went for it. You just got to do it. And you can have talk back in your ear, which is basically one of the producers going, "Right, you've got 1 minute left. You've got 30 seconds left. You need to plate this dish up now and get them to eat the dish now before we cut out." TikTok. Fine. So, and it just worked for me. I just enjoyed it. I loved it. It was that environment that worked. I mean, if things go wrong, you've got 2 options really. You can either tell everybody, make a joke of it, or you can just ignore it and get on with it. If you burn yourself, you don't tell anybody, you just get on with it and you just deal with it afterwards. That's happened a few times. You just got to do these things. And I think live is a very different beast. Some people can't do live TV. But that's the same as if I said to you, if I put someone on stage and interviewed them in front of thousands of people, they couldn't do it. So it's just how people are in their environments, and I've always thrived with that.
I remember I was a couple of days. I was watching one of your videos. I think it was on This Morning, and you were cooking something, and they were asking you about I think it was Scotch eggs, and they were like, "Oh yeah, so you boil it in hot water, then you put it in cold water, and it's exactly this amount of time." And they were asking you and asking you and asking you, and you could tell that you had a specific time frame before you had to move something over, and you just kind of cut it dead, and then you just moved on to the next bit. It was just so brilliant how you did that, because
there's some, and the problem is what I remember doing some slots with Holly and Phil. I think there's probably one still somewhere on the internet somewhere, and it was like I can't remember what we were doing. It was like I was doing a toad in a hole or something. I was doing like it was a pancake mix, but then it was I could use it for like making Yorkshire puddings. I'd done a clever sort of take on quirky things, because obviously that sort of audience really liked the quirkiness or the adaptation. And we'd done something, and I'd had some sausages, we'd pan fried them, and I poured my Yorkie pudding mix in my tray, and it was like halfway up a sausage, and I said this halfway up a sausage, and literally Holly and Phil just broke up into laughter and just started wetting themselves. There was another moment as well, which was quite good. I remember when I was doing the quiche, I think it was my first one. And I was showing them both how to sort of, do the sort of the pastry skills. What I didn't remember, of course, that was, we've got exceptionally hot lights in, and I'm trying to do pastry, which was the most stupidest thing I've ever done. But I managed to get away with it. Anyway, I'm sort of doing this pastry, got my hands covered in flour. And normally I'd put like a little bowl underneath the counter. So I'm sort of doing my thing, playing around, getting the pastry done, getting it blind baked in. And then I'd asked Holly to do something with the flour or whatever. So she did that next to me. And then of course she put her hands under the counter, literally like this. And it looked very precarious. And then Phil turned around and went, "Welcome to the show, Marcus." And it was just one of those moments where you just have this sort of breakout. But you've at the same time got to retain that professionalism, because you've got a time frame. So you can't, you've got to go with it and make it fun and pull those moments in. But at the same time, you've got to have the dish ready at the end for them to taste. And they always want the dish plated and ready to taste. So there's been some great moments, in the same way that sometimes I've got all the way down to London, and it's only happened once, but I got all the way down to London. I think it was the Queen was on a boat going down on the River Thames or something. I can't remember what it was for. And they just ran out of time. So they had this really quite important slot before, and then they just said, "We can't do cooking today. We just haven't got time." So that would happen occasionally, because it would always be the first thing that got chopped. But it's just, I just love that moment of excitement. And I think there's certain people who can do it really well, and there's certain people that really struggle with it. And I suppose I just thrive with it, really.
I think it's fantastic. The one thing I always like, everybody thinks about what it would be like to be certain things. Like I've always wanted to be like to be a radio presenter or be on the TV. Well, these are the things. And TV chef is one of those things I don't think I could ever do because of how fussy I am. I don't eat fish. I don't like egg, and I don't like mushrooms and all these sort of things. But like I imagine like the Holly and Phil, or particularly people you're plating up for like live TV. They'll have particular things they don't like. Now, what do? Do they taste the food and pretend to like it? Or they do live on TV say, "No, I don't like that. I can't eat it."
Yeah, I mean, no, they would never be like that in terms. There's allowances in TV for a lot of stuff. So there is certain times if you've got certain presenters who have got a certain dietary requirement, they would either just not taste the dish, or so like the other presenter, if there was two presenters, one might taste it, one might not, and just sort of talk, and so they balance that off. Generally, people are pretty good. I mean, it's a bit like cooking to a certain extent. If I've got a chef that is really fussy and doesn't eat everything, I say that's fine if you don't like it, but you've got to understand you're feeding this to a customer, so you have to be able to know. So unless you're allergic to it, you've got to be able to taste it and understand that it's seasoned properly and it tastes right. And actually, over time, people sometimes change their eating habits. Notoriously, Tom Kerridge has got a shellfish allergy, and one of the dishes he did very well with on Great British Menu was a shellfish dish, and he had to do that was to get his. So he had a very good confidence in his own ability to create something and season it properly, but he had to give that tasting skill to like a sous chef or someone else to say, "Look, can you just double check that?" Because he physically couldn't taste it because he knew he would have a reaction. So there's elements of I suppose just being creative, and I think presenters are exceptionally good. I mean, one thing, if you're ever doing things like, you probably don't know, but things like MasterChef and stuff like that, these aren't live shows. So what they're doing is there's a lot of prelims. So it's the time frame, right? That's cut off, and then there's a lot of time between them being cut off, putting their dishes up, to obviously every dish getting tasted. Could be half an hour, could be even longer. So, the judges at that point are not allowed to judge on temperature of the food, which is understandable.
Yeah.
So they have to judge it purely on flavor, purely on presentation. So there's, because it wouldn't be fair, if I was the last one to get judged, if they came up and said, well, your dish is cold. Well, of course it's been cold. It's been sat there for 45 minutes. So, so you've got to be quite, so I think it's a balance of doing those things, but most people I think are always very good. And I think, if I have people with dietary requirements, we'll try and fit it in. And, you've got to adapt to everything these days. Sometimes it just means more work. Some chefs want to do it, some chefs don't.
Speaking to Adam Purnell, he's a good friend of ours. He's been on a couple of my shows, Shropshire lad, obviously. He was telling me, because he was on that TV show on BBC, on Channel 4, and he was saying there's a lot of trickery when it comes to certain things. Obviously, that was highly edited because that was done over like a weekend or something, over a few days. Are there any sort of tricks and tips that you can tell us about what they do sort of on TV to make things look a bit better because it's all live and obviously a lot of things are pre-cooked. But
live is a no, really. To be honest, live is what it is. So it comes down to exactly, and it comes down to the skill of whoever's preparing it, whoever's presenting it. So that's really down to me and the home economist to make sure that finished product is done. There's an element of sometimes set dressing of things that are already prepaid and done. So live's very, very different in terms of like your magazine shoots, your TV shoots, all that sort of stuff. There is a lot of obviously, what we call food styling that goes on. I've done a little bit of food styling, only little bits on my own shoots and stuff we've done. And obviously there's lots of things. I mean, notoriously over this has been going on for many, many years, but if you ever see a beautifully basted turkey, that's always a raw turkey covered in like soy sauce and all sorts of different things. So because it keeps the plumpness, if you put a turkey that's been cooked or a chicken that's been cooked, obviously you would lose that plumpness. So it's always a raw product that's taken a shot of. There's lots of trickery in terms of stuff that's done. There's sometimes, when you're watching things, you might not want to sort of taste them because they might have had other ingredients put in them. Other things like, I'm trying to think what it was. Sometimes with like sparkling drinks, they might put like Alka-Seltzers in them to give them lots of bubbles. I mean, there's all sorts. There's weird and wonderful things you can put, but that comes down to really the skill set of a food stylist. And there's, food stylist and home economist are slightly different, but some of them do both roles. And they're very clever. And, things like Great British Menu, the chefs, work exceptionally hard on the presentation and the delivery. Obviously the food is exceptionally important, but that's a key part of their dish. And it's really the same with Bake Off, if you're looking at the Bake Off, for example, if they get a challenge on Bake Off, and it's like a special cake challenge or whatever it is going to be, that hasn't been, something they've just been thrown at, that's something they've been allowed to practice because, they're allowed to go away. So part of the whole filming process, if they have a showstopper cake or whatever, they're allowed to go and do that and try it at home because, as a viewer, you want to see this incredible cake, but someone couldn't do that on spec. It's not, physically possible. So they've got to go away, get it right. And then they've got to do it in real time, but they've actually already practiced it. So it allows us. So there's lots of things that go on TV, but I think, I suppose probably we have more, I think it's more fun and exciting, now doing things like what I do, which is, a lot of the BBC Good Food shows and the live shows. So working with a lot of the, the big chefs on stage where you've got 2,500 people in front of you, and they've got literally 25 minutes probably to create their 3 dishes, but in front of a live audience, which is pretty full on. I mean, that's pretty hard for some.
I imagine that's crazy hard. What's it like going from, so obviously when you run a pub and when you got your own restaurant, you are in the limelight. Like everybody's focused on your food. They're ready to make a complaint if it's bad. Compliments as well. What's it like going from running your own pub and having that focus absolutely quadrupled? As soon as you're on TV, the focus is on Marcus Bean and what Marcus Bean's made. It must be an enormous amount of pressure because when you're on TV, it's for a short span of time. But when you're cooking, this is a whole career for you. I think it's one of the, I suppose I'm different. I mean, it's probably more reflective on someone, let's say, that does, for example, Saturday Kitchen, or Great British Menu is a great influencer of that because you watch the show and you're watching a standard, and then sometimes you expect that same standard
in that sort of that person's restaurant, which obviously it doesn't always happen, because something like Great British Menu or Saturday Kitchen's a bit different, but Great British Menu would be a showcase of that product. You're trying and you have time, and you can put in effort to create something which is exceptional. You wouldn't necessarily always be able to replicate that in your working environment and doing it at 60 covers and so on and so on. So chefs are very good in terms of adapting and changing. For myself, it wasn't too bad, because like I say, with even with sort of great when I did Iron Chef, it wasn't the show wasn't a massive success. So it sort of allowed me just to sort of steadily grow, develop my skill, go back to the pub, do my own thing, and just build my own sort of reputation from that, which was great. When I've done things like this morning again, you'll be surprised how many people don't relate to, they would see you on, for example, this morning cooking a dish. They wouldn't necessarily know that you had a pub and you had a restaurant. And so they don't always collate the two together. Something like Saturday Kitchen is very specific in terms of going, right, we've got Marcus Bean, for example, from, such, and they name your restaurant, and that you're going to get a massive amount of bookings that are going to come from that. I've always liked the whole sort of interaction with customers. I've always liked that. That link. And don't get me wrong, over a period of time, I've had lots of people from social media that have traveled from all over the country to come and have dinner at the pub, in the same way that people come now to the cookery stall and come and get taught. And that's fantastic. I mean, I love that sort of element of it. But it's I think that's probably why some people don't do restaurants nowadays, because it is a real high pressured environment.
You keep that reputation up, haven't you? You got to.
Yeah, and I think you've got an enormous amount of pressure. It's like winning the Michelin star to a certain extent, because a Michelin star for a lot of chefs is the peak. That's what they aim for. They want to achieve star status in a 1, 2, or 3. That's what they're driving themselves forward to, because it's a recognition element for them, which is totally understandable. But it's also an incredibly pressured environment. And I know people have won Michelin stars, but I also know people have lost them. And that's, that's hard, and notoriously over the years, there's been a lot of people where the pressure has become way too much. And they've veered off, or they've taken their own life. It increases a lot of pressure on yourself, but at the same time, it's that recognition. So you've got to be quite clever in balancing, what you want from and what you want to achieve, what you want from your life. And I think there's a lot of chefs out there do go and achieve Michelin star status, in a really high level. And sometimes they come away from it and go, do you know what? I've done it. I'm walking away from it. But it really comes down to yourself. And I suppose also as well, lots of other things that affect it, like your family and your environment. You're working a lot of hours doing these things, sometimes you have to sort of turn around and go, do you know what? I've got to take some time out, and you've got to sort of recalibrate and work.
What are we having for dinner? Chippy. That's what we're having.
But that's the reality of most chefs, and Tom Kerridge is very good at that. Actually, he's a good example. We look at Tom, and he's got a 2 Michelin star pub. He's got a 1 Michelin star coach. He's got restaurants all over the shop, that are getting incredible accolades. He's won Great British Menu 2 or 3 times. I can't remember how many times it is. He is an incredible chef. But, the reality is he doesn't go home and put a stock on every night and then reduce that down and make a jus for his steak that he's cooking up for him and his wife and his kids. It doesn't happen. The reality is he probably uses a stock cube. Well, he does use a stock cube, so you're using simple things. You're cooking simple food. And actually, most chefs eat really basic stuff. The amount of chefs that I know that live on like pot noodles and, quick noodle packs and stuff like that, because it's easy and convenient. And actually, sometimes when you put so much pressure in creating someone else's dishes and doing lots of dishes, like hundreds and hundreds of covers, you go home and the last thing you want to do is cook. So, it's about making sure you don't lose that sort of spark that you have in a restaurant.
Yeah, I
when
imagine
you're at home. But it's that balance. It is quite hard.
Huge. My wife, actually, I did throw up some suggestions for questions. No one wrote in. I think I put it a bit too close to the interview. But my wife asked, when it comes to Christmas dinner, are you in charge, or do you let the missus take control?
To be honest, me and Jenny have got. Jenny's a very good cook as well. So we have a really good sort of a balance. Again, I'd say probably lockdown has probably been the hardest for like cooking and things. In terms of stuff like Christmas, I do enjoy it. My only downside is I would say that Jenny probably doesn't enjoy it when I'm cooking, only because I tend to go, right, I'm going to school, or I'm going, and I'm prepping. So I'm getting things ready. I'm doing the roast potatoes, 24 hours before. I'm getting all the veggies ready. I'm getting everything prepped. I'm making a stock and a sauce. So I am going all out for that. And that takes a lot of time out. And then, of course, sometimes as well, I've got that natural host in me where if I have people around for dinner, I end up sometimes being not with the people that we've invited around, because I'm always going, right, I'm wandering off and I'm grabbing this and I'm grabbing that. And then before you know it, you've done 3 courses and you've done that, and I'm putting something else, and then I'm doing a bit of washing up, and then it's like, hold on a minute, what are you doing? Just come back and sit down. So I have to sort of remind myself that I have to prep everything in advance and get it ready. So we sort of take it in turns, really. This year, we did it all ourselves, and it's good. And we have also done, a Marks and Spencer's Christmas, like a lot of people do. There's cheats and things. I always think like making the roasties is always my favourite thing to do. I always like doing them. I don't buy roast potatoes, don't buy Yorkie puds, even though my mum does, who's a chef. Little things like that. But I think it doesn't matter. I think at the end of the day, if you can do things, great. But what you don't want to do is end up doing loads of stuff in the kitchen and not enjoying the moment, not enjoying that experience of having a really nice sit down Christmas lunch. So we try and take it in turns and try and do what we can, really. But, I think that's the balance, isn't it?
The Yorkshire pudding is one of the most amazing things that we have in this country. I host a transatlantic show called You Suck. My co-host is from Vermont, and I keep trying to explain to him how amazing a Yorkshire pudding is and trying to get him to make one or buy whatever, just try a Yorkshire pudding with a roast. And he just won't. He can't understand the concept of what it is, and it's a very difficult thing to explain.
No, I think it's a great thing. Yorkshire puddings are fantastic. I think in there's the whole balance of what they are and what they bring. But I think it's a lot of things with food. People always ask me and say, well, how do you make things taste good? How do you make things and for me as a chef, over a period of time, you tend to think about textures and flavors and combinations and, salt and sweetness and acidity and all these things that balance. So whenever you think about creating something, you just think about that component element. And actually, if you look at like a roast beef, for example, or roast pork or whatever it is, it doesn't really matter whether you have that Yorkshire pudding with it, because the encompassment is it's sort of like crispy on the outside, but it's soft in the center. It's sort of, it can absorb that meat, it can absorb that gravy, it does all those things you want it to do. And then, of course, with a potato, you want, if you're having a roast potato, you want it to be crispy and crunchy, but then soft on the inside. So it's all about textures and flavors and elements and seasoning. And it's just about that combination of stuff. Some of the best things you can eat could be a really incredible salad that can actually have that combination of grains, different pulses, different flavors, sweetness, saltiness from soy sauce, all these things that mix in. And when you get those together, it's just like heaven. And like I say, Yorkshire puddings are sort of one of those things that sit really well with most stuff, especially meat. And, you can put them with everything. That's where they go well with sausages and toad in the hole. And, you could do all sorts of them.
It's a good food. It's a good food. Of course, you mentioned lockdown just a second ago. We've seen I've just spoken to George McKay from. He's created Hokey Pokey in Shrewsbury, which is really cool. It's a pokey food.
Oh, okay.
But this is just one of many restaurants that have kitchens that have started making food through lockdown. Yeah. So sort of spreading their wings. Why not? We're all sat at home anyway. It's got to be great that this lockdown period hasn't just stopped people. There's people out there that gone and sort of honed in on their skill. I think George is a fantastic guy because he was a waiter. He's waited on and been behind the bars and stuff for years and years and years. And all of a sudden he was like, no, I'm doing this myself, So he's had that experience, It's just really nice. What's lockdown been like for you? Obviously you got the Brompton school, cooking school, you got the pub, things like that. It must have been really hard for you. What was that like?
Yeah, luckily, I'd say luckily, just because it was another pressure environment, we don't have the pub now. So when we moved here, we had an overlap of where we had the pub and the school for about a year. And then, we sold that so about 7 years ago. So in some ways, as much as I miss the pub, sort of in this climate, it's sort of a bit of I'm probably better off without it. So we've had the cookery school, which has been a bit of a nightmare in terms of not being able to run things for us, because obviously, it affected all of our sales that we do, through the Christmas period. So that's had a big impact on us. In terms of gift vouchers and people buying experience and courses. And we do everything from, like fish meat courses, kids courses, foraging courses, I do one-to-one tuition. So we do everything. but that's been a real sort of struggle because we couldn't trade, and then we could trade, and then we were closed. And the first lockdown, we thought we've got to do something. So we actually set up a little sort of mini farm shop, one to obviously give us some sort of cash flow, but also to try and help support some of our suppliers, because all the businesses are closed. All our suppliers that we've been using for like the last 15, 20 years, we're sort of struggling. So we just said, well, we'll start doing something. So we put a shop in the cookery school. I borrowed a coffee machine. We were doing like, proper decent coffee. And we sort of tweaked it all up and did it. And then when we were allowed to reopen the back end of summer, we just thought, well, we want to continue this in some way, shape or form, because we always thought about doing it eventually as running something alongside the cookery school. So we actually converted a little space on the side and did that. And then we've been running that every Friday and Saturday, pretty much from day one, which has allowed us to sort of, again, do some sort of really nice coffees. We sell our own blend of coffee, but, we use some of our fantastic suppliers as well. So we sell all the essentials like really good quality salts and cooking oils, rapeseed oils. But then we also have some fresh produce like meats and occasional bits of fish and lots of fresh fruits, but also lots of good store covered ingredients. So that's been one of our challenges we had. We got a couple of pigs. We had some pigs in the first round of lockdown. They've been good. They need to be going soon, unfortunately. But yeah, we do that. We try and grow quite a bit of stuff on site. I think the biggest thing now is the last lockdown's been hard because, of course, you haven't really been able to do much outside. So, the weather's been pretty horrendous. Gardening sort of non-existent really until it's starting to come a little bit through now. But yeah, it's been challenging. I mean, I also, that we know as well, but I also work as a consultant over in Ironbridge Gorge Museum Trust. So I run all their catering facilities, which I took over in Jan. And then I've got the Furnace Kitchen, which I, again, sort of looked after for the trust. And we built that a couple of years ago. So I started working them on a sort of a casual basis, and then it's developed and become a bit more. So I do about 3 days sort of working for them, which is, as you imagine, everything's closed at the moment, but we've got a lot of planning to do moving forward. So that's sort of, we've got a team, obviously, that are all on furlough. We've been trying to get sort of, a lot of funding for the museums to try and balance that. We're trying to focus all the catering. We've got, weddings and events plans. So there's lots going on that side as well. And with this, and also as well, trying to balance, other stuff as well. So, we're trying to be proactive, and, this time the whole sort of homeschooling's been a bit of a nightmare. I'm not going to lie. I think most parents out there
we've all felt that a little bit
at the end of their tether, and are just like, oh my God, so yeah, it's been hard, but we've done the odd sort of stuff. We've done a few like Sunday lunch takeouts, which we're doing. We did a big Valentine's takeout, which we did last weekend, which has worked really well. We'll probably continue with a few of those. Again, it's just trying to create a bit of cash flow for this side of our business, because a lot of it is, and that's where I think a lot of people have come and they sort of, created these home pop-up kitchens, which is a really good idea. You just get in contact with your local council, you get your kitchen, sort of signed off by EHO just to say, yeah, it's fine. You can prepare your food in here, what you're doing. And then, of course, the great thing is people be able to sort of sign up to things like Zoom, local delivery services. And actually you can do that. And I think that's a great way. It creates, I've always been a massive fan of street food. I don't know whether you remember quite a few years ago if you're still in Shrewsbury, but I created the first ever sort of street food event called Eat Street many years ago in Shrewsbury. And we did about 3 events all in all. And I sort of worked really closely with the bid and the local council. And we did it in St. Ortman's Church in the yard right off sort of Butcher Road. And it was incredible. I brought people like Dogtown from London. They came up. I had Seasons actually on the sort of second or third one, did a little pop-up for me. I had Barkworth. I managed to get him to set up like a little seafood stand. We had Legina doing sort of curries. I love
Legina. She's awesome.
Yeah. So again, it was me sort of collating a lot of people together. And it was a sort of free event where people came, and it was sort of a collation of like 8 or 9 really good street food traders. So we did that a few times over the period. So I've always been, really massively into, street food and that promotion. And one of the reasons why it's so good is because it's such an easy market to access. If I said to you, right, I actually love food, I want you to go and set up a restaurant, you'd be like, right, okay, geez, I've got my rent, I've got my tax, I've got my insurance, I've got my wages, I've got the gas, I've got the electric, I've got the water. How am I going to make any money? And that's the reality. It's exceptionally expensive. But actually with street food and with sort of home food, kitchens nowadays is the actual income, the outcome and the capital input is very low. So if you've got a passion for something, you can create it. And like I said, because of things that have been accentuated, like the delivery services, have given people that opportunity to go, do you know what? Why don't we do it and give it a go? And actually it's a really good way. And then it's almost testing the water before you know, if you look at London as a street food scene. And I work with very closely with a guy called Dom Coles, who was one of the co-founders of Street Feast in London. And I mean, over the progressive years, they were one of the first ones, and they were doing all sorts. But a lot of their traders, you know, had a little stand, you know, selling sort of tacos or selling pizzas or selling, you know, wonderful stuff. They've now got restaurants all over London, you know, but it was a tester market for them to work out if it was viable. Can I do it? And yes, I can. So yeah, massive fan of sort of, you know, street food pop-ups, new food businesses. I think we've always got to adapt and change. And I mean, I'm a massive fan of anything that's food, to be honest.
I remember the first time I went to a proper like street food place. It was in Digbeth in Birmingham.
Oh, I can hear you now. There you go. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
I was just saying that the first time I went to this amazing place in Digbeth. In Birmingham.
Oh yeah, Digbeth Dining Club, yeah.
Oh my god, amazing! We've been to watch Jay and Silent Bob reboot. I don't know. We'd had a few beers and met with a load of friends from around the country. And my friend was like, "We're going to go get some food." I was like, I didn't quite know what to expect. And we went to the Digbeth Dining Club. It was just amazing. You walk into this nightclub and it's just like food stalls everywhere. Amazing scene. The food was just smelled amazing. The music was great. I had a real good chat with some of the people there. It was really good.
Yeah. It was, yeah, and that was one of, when we first did Eat Street. Actually, that was one. There was a lady who worked for the Bid, and that was one of the things we went to look at because they were quite keen on doing something in Shrewsbury. And I sort of went over and I said, "Oh, we'll have a look and we'll go and see it." And we had a look at them, and I just went, "I think we just do it on our own." so we ended up doing it on our own in the end, which was great. I mean, they've obviously got an incredible following. I think they paired up with Sammy Libertine in the end and started doing some stuff at Seven Social. There was a link there, wasn't there, with Digbeth? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the movement they've had, and you know, it's been incredible, and they've done some really good stuff over that period.
It's the Favreau effect. John Favreau is a genius, and he made that movie Chef, where he made the food truck. Because everything, obviously, that John Favreau touches just turns into gold, as you can see. Right. So we talked a bit about sort of taking that step into sort of making a brand of yourself, go out there and making something of yourself. What advice would you give to sort of aspiring chefs that want to go out there and sort of be the new Marcus Bean, or go and become the new chef? What advice would you give?
It's a sort of couple of bits of advice, really. I mean, the first one is don't go out there with that presumption that.
I thought you were going to say don't do it. Just don't do it.
No, well, I've told a few people to do that when they've asked me if we used to have that when we had the pub. We had a couple of people come up to us and they went, "Oh, can we have a chat after work?" You know, yeah, that's fine. What do you want to do? And they were like, "Oh, we're thinking about buying a pub." And me and Jenny both sit down and go, "Right, okay, let's just stop you right there." So, like, I'm going to ask you some honest questions. I want some honest answers. And we'd say, right, okay, so what do you do? So we'd ask the person, wife, husband, whatever, what do you do? I said, look, I'm asking you this question. What do you earn? Right, okay, blah, blah, blah. How many hours do you work? Okay, fine. Okay, so I said, right, that's your income now. That's your salary. That's what you do. I said, so take all that away. Take your salary away. Double the hours that you work. Do you still want to run a pub? And they'd say, okay, what do you mean? I go, well, I'm asking you a really honest question. And they go, well, no, why would we? And we'll go, there's your answer then. Don't do a pub. And we used to say that same thing. So with the food element and with the thing is, there's a lot of people now who want to become a celebrity chef. And I don't class myself as a celebrity chef by any means. There's Tom Kerridge, James Martins, those people, they've done exceptionally well. But remember, they didn't set out to become a celebrity chef. There is, a celebrity chef is a title that's been, sort of pinned on people because they're in that sort of celebrity spotlight. It's same with Paul Hollywood. Paul Hollywood was a baker and he worked in a hotel and he was running kitchens in Cyprus and he was a pastry chef for many years. He happened to apply for a show and it took him to stardom, and he's now an exceptionally good, whatever you want to call a celebrity baker, bake-off man, whatever.
Icon.
Icon, exactly, yeah. Free Aston Martins, all that sort of stuff. So don't aim for that. That's the biggest thing. It's the same way that I would say if you want to achieve a Michelin star, don't aim for a Michelin star. Do what you believe in and things will come. And I think that's the thing people have got to understand. If you want to get an element or you're interested in TV and film, get experience. So go and work in some incredible kitchens, go and work with some incredible chefs to learn your craft and learn your trade. And, I've done it over the years. Even when I was learning, I went over and worked at, Le Bocas with Will Holland, for free. When I was, even not that long ago, I was doing an event for good food show, and I was down at Olympia. And at the time I was like, I'm working Olympia. I've got 4 days, hosting a stage down there. And I knew that, that Heston's restaurant, Dinner by Heston, was not far away at the Mandarin Oriental. So I messaged Ashley Palmer Watts, who I'm now good friends with. I said, Ashley, can I come down and do some work? And he went, what do you mean? He went, well, I said, well, I'm down in London. I said, I'm working for a couple of days. I said, I can arrive like a day early and I'll come and work. And he went, what do you mean? I said, like, can I just come and work in the kitchen? He went, you'll come and do a stage. And I was like, yeah. He went, oh, okay, if you want, mate. And this is things that happen regularly. They have people who sort of come for a job when they'll do a stage, but not normally like me. But I just said, I'll come down. So I go down there and start work. I think I started about 12 o'clock, chuck on my chef whites, throw me in each section. I want to see everything, throw me in the restaurant, show me so they show me every element of where we're going. And you're tasting food and experiencing and stuff, but you understand how the business works, how many people are on shift, how many people are there. For me, I'm always thinking, oh my God, like how many staff have they got? How much is that costing? How much is that? But you understand, you taste, you get to learn those skills. You understand how hard people work. That's really important. And when you've got to that point of where you feel it, then that's where you can adapt. And even if you wanted to go into TV, there's lots of incredible jobs in other elements. So it might be that you want to become a baker rather than a chef. It might become that you want to be a pastry chef rather than a chef. It might be that you want to become a fine dining chef, or you might want to become a street food chef. It might be that you want to do food styling. Yeah, or you might want to become a home economist, which is an exceptionally good job. Home economists are the backbone of all good TV shows. So they get all the glamorous part of being behind the set, working with all the, you look at Bake Off, they've got a team of home economists who are weighing all the ingredients, putting stuff out ready, having things done. There's washing up in there as well, but, they're doing everything, so they have a really good, clever way of working in TV, being on the sides. Sometimes that they'll work on books and book shoots. Some will actually write books for people as well. So there's so many different areas in food to do, but the biggest thing I say is it's always about experience. Just go out and say, can I come and work? Can I come and work for free? Can I come and help out? Can I come and do something to get experience, and just get that experience with lots of people, and also research. Do your work. Have a look at things, understand things. I think the problem we had with a lot of the sort of catering colleges, probably not so much now, but previously, was, people would be sort of almost pigeonholed into, they'd go to the careers advice at school, and it was like, what do you want to do? And I'm, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I don't like this. And, well, do you like cooking? Yeah, I like cooking. Right, well, do you want to go to catering college? And then throw them to catering college. Off you go. And they go, oh, this is quite nice. Like, I rock up at college at like 9 o'clock in the morning. I finished at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, got a few assignments, do a bit of cooking, eat a bit of food. Yeah, great. And actually, when they finish their 2-year course or whatever, they come out and they go, right, you've got to get a job. And then they go, okay, so I'm going to get my first job. And then they get into a kitchen and they realize that they're working a phenomenal amount of hours. The pressure is exceptionally high. The wage is the minimum wage, and it's the bit until they go, I don't want to do this. But they've wasted those 2 years. So always just try, and there's some incredible people that come out of colleges, but at the same time, I think you've got to test the water before you know what career you've got to take. It's like anything, isn't it? If you were doing the same with your, you know that you could go and work in a studio or go and work in a, try and get people's advice and talk to people, and it builds you up and it makes you better. I did exactly the same when I started doing all the hosting of the super theatres. I never wanted to do, a bit like cooking, I didn't want to go and host a big super theatre with loads of big super chefs. I was cooking at a food show because of Iron Chef, because of the whole TV thing. And I was doing, at the time, I got my first gig was I tried to get into the BBC Good Food Show because I knew it was the biggest food show in the country. Like, I was like, I've got to get in there. So I think it was via Twitter at the time. Instagram wasn't around. So I messaged someone on Twitter and said, and it was like a food producer, a lady called Katie Truss, who's an incredible lady. And she was a food finder. So she found all these amazing food producers. And I messaged her and said, look, I'd love to come and do some cooking at the show. Never done like big demonstrations ever before. And she went, okay, well, I'll see if I can get you in with someone. She got me in 1 year, free ticket. Didn't end up seeing someone. I came back next year. She got me and I ended up speaking to one of the sort of like directors. And they said, well, we've got this thing coming up. Maybe you could do that. And this was all like around my agent. Anyway, it turned out that basically it was at NPower at the time. Used to have like a a stand in the middle of the cookery, theatre. There's 1,000 people a day, and they'd have this little Empower stand, which had a little kitchen station. And basically, they'd employ a chef, and the chef would be cooking up something. Everybody'd come and watch, obviously. They'd finish cooking, and then literally all of Empower sales staff would come over and sell you gas and electric.
Brilliant.
So I got this contract to do that at all the good food shows. I did Scotland, did Ireland, did London, we did York, we did all sorts. So I was sort of traveling with the food show all the time. And I started doing that, and then that faded out with Empower. And the show really liked me. So they said, do you fancy doing like a little bit of something on a stage, like a couple of demos? I was like, yeah. And I just got to the point where I went, I can only cook on a stage for so long. Like that's only going to be, sustainable for so long. And you get like a half an hour slot, so you get paid for that one slot. I thought, well, hold on a minute. If someone's hosting a stage, they're here for like the whole 4 days. So I thought, so I said, if you ever need like someone to host, just let me know. Anyway, they gave me this little like Magimix stand. It was like 50 people in a little freer in front, and then I had a few people who come on, so not the big one, not the big stages, just the small ones. And I started doing that, and then I did that probably for about a year and a half, and I'd do a little cooking demo in between, like me, like a little demonstration using a Magimix or whatever. And then I just got a text from one of the directors one day, and they said, look, the guy who's doing the stand, he was a professional presenter at the time, he was a sports presenter, and they said he's got to be off doing something, would you jump in and do it? And I got this text, and I looked at Jen and I went, oh my God, they just asked me to host the Super Theatre. And she went, what do you mean? And I was like, well, that's from the director of BBC Good Food. She just asked me to host the Super Theatre. I said, that's 2,500 to 3,000 people every show. Wow. I said, we do 5 shows a day. I said that, and it's half an hour, like bang, bang. I said, there's a big difference. I said, it's just me, she went, what are you doing? Just text her back and say yes. And I was like, okay, fine. So I texted back, said yes. And that was it. And it was literally, you go into it and you are just bang. And it is, me and a cameraman, which we've built up a great relationship over the years. But, we go up and we've got to entertain. You imagine people pay for a ticket to come in, 2,500 people, and they're going to come watch James Martin or Mary Berry or Paul Hollywood or whatever. When they come in, you've got to get them super excited. So we used to have like giveaways and stuff. So basically I have to
T-shirt cannons,
massive. I have to become this massive ball of energy on stage. But at the same time, I've got to nail all my sponsorship, because obviously the theatre's paid for by Sainsbury's or Tesco's or Lidl or Asda or whatever. So you have to go in and give this whole sort of, like sponsorship deal, but at the same time, making it not boring for the punter. At the same time, getting the punters really excited so that when the chef comes out, they have this massive explosion and like excitement, because if the chef comes out onto stage and there's no like clapping and cheering and whatever, they're going to get a complex, Well, and also they get a complex because they're like, hold on a minute, Paul Hollywood got a bigger one than James Martin. What's going on? So that sort of, I fell into that, and I think you just got to do these things. But I used to sit and watch the guy who used to do the big theatre before in my breaks, and I'd go and see what he did, and then I'd like listen, and I'd be like, okay. And eventually, I took his job. He's done very well. He's an exceptional sports presenter. He does a lot of the other stuff, but that was one of his his things. So I ended up doing that, and it's sort of, I've stayed with it ever since, and been doing it for the last 5 or 6 years, and I just absolutely love it. But it's still, you still, that little butterflies in your belly before you go on stage to 2,500 people.
But it's amazing. It's amazing.
It is amazing, but it's also scary at the same time. You just got to go and do it, haven't you?
Well, like with what I'm doing now, I'm not going to compare that to working in a super theatre, but but
you have it in a different way, though, isn't it? Different, the view is the same, but it's in a different format. You could
this
be
is
seen
practice
all
for
over
me.
the world.
This is practice for me. I love doing what I'm doing. And before I even started the biscuit, I actually asked if I could sit in with BBC Shropshire and watch a show be produced. Just sit and watch. I don't want to take part. I just want to watch how it's put together. And they did. They very kindly let me come and sit and watch and see how things were put together. And because I went from this R-rated show where I'd swear a lot to this family-friendly show here that I can't read it. So I wanted to know a bit about structure. And you're right. It is about just going and just being a part of something. That's really important. Yeah. It's a really good message. Now, Marcus, I know we're running up on our time. I've just got one more question to ask you. Thank you, by the way, for coming on. This has been amazing.
No problem.
We're bringing this question back, and we thought you'd be the first person. We used to ask this at the end of every episode. What does Shrewsbury mean to you?
Shrewsbury and sort of Shropshire as a whole.
Shrewsbury, Shropshire, yeah.
Yeah, it's. I've been here since I was 17, so I'm like 42, I think. I always forget how old I am. I have to ask my wife. But yeah, I've always been a massive fan of it, and I think it's an incredible town, incredible sort of county. One, because it sort of showcases some incredible talent. We've got some really lovely people, not people who've been here necessarily all their lives. We've got people who sort of moved up here, or some people moved away as well. But it's a congregation of a really great group of people that are very creative. We've got some incredible artisans that I've met over the years, whether they're, people like sort of Sitch Farm, who sort of creates some incredible pottery, and my friend John, who's sort of the other half of Sitch Farm, who's an incredible carpenter. There's just some really good talented people, and then produces everything from our milk to our bread to, what we do to what we create. And I mean, I grew up in Hendon-on-Thames, so Shrewsbury for me, when I moved here 17 years ago, I came and I was like, oh my God, like, why are they not doing anything with the river? Why is it? So it was almost like I moved from Hendon-on-Thames, which if you've ever been to Hendon-on-Thames, we've had the regatta there for years on the river. You've got a massive boatyard. You've got, exceptional pubs and things. Pubs are all on the bridge. It was a thriving place for many years, especially when I was growing up. And I came to Shrewsbury and I went, oh my God, it's like I've stepped back 20 years. And it hasn't, it's progressed slowly, very, very slowly over that period of time. But I think the good thing with Shrewsbury is it's still got so much more to give. And I think we've, I wouldn't like to necessarily always live in a town, but if I was going to live in a town, I think I would live in Shrewsbury, because you've got that incredible community of some incredible little coffee shops. I love the coffee shops. I'm a big fan of like to the Gingers and, Sea Suns now are there, and some other incredible things like Flapper, and the coffee house and the market hall. That was one of the reasons. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why I did like Eat Street Shrewsbury, I'd love to bring that back at some point in the future. I mean, it never made me any money, but it was something that really brought that community together and showcased some incredible talent, not just from Shrewsbury, but brought it all to Shrewsbury to balance it in. And I think, Shrewsbury's getting so much better with adapting and changing and bringing, that sort of talent together. And I think it's quite sustainable in the way that we can move it forward, because I think we've got more and more talented people moving to the area as well, which then gives us that, but I think we've still got a long way to go. But for me, it's always been that lovely place. It's got that character. It's got those people. And we just need to showcase some of the other little bits a little bit more. And I think some people are very protective, aren't they? Go, no, don't tell everyone about Shrewsbury, because then everybody will come. Well, we want people to come, don't we? We want, we've got to think about the economy. We've got to think about all those shop owners and those, independent businesses. We need them to thrive so that they don't close. We've got to. That's my job. That's what the biscuit's here for, is to tell people about the great things about Shrewsbury, and we ain't stopping.
Exactly. Marcus, you've been an amazing guest. I'd love to speak to you again sometime, because I feel like we've covered about 5 to 10% of you. I think there's so much more to come.
Oh yeah, and I apologize. I do talk a lot. So,
I love the podcast. I train up other podcasts, and I've got 2 different networks, and I have that question a lot. Is like, what do you do when the guest is great at talking? And I was like, just let them talk. This is the best thing. I'm hearing about your story, and people are tuning in for you, not me. So I'm really glad that we managed to cover what we have today. But you're welcome on any time. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Definitely.
Before we get out of here, would you like to tell people where they can find bits about you, especially about the Brompton Cookery School? Where can people find that?
Yeah, cool. So if you want to find out about Brompton Cookery School, we are obviously on things like Instagram. We've obviously got our own website. Check out our website. It's probably the best thing, which is bromptoncookeryschool.co.uk. There's also things from vouchers, and also as well, if we're running any things like the Sunday takeout, stuff like that, it all goes online. You just purchase it. Come and check out our little farm shop. We open Friday and Saturday, 10 till 5. I do lots of baked goodies, so I'm going to be going in the kitchen in a minute, making lots of brownies, quiches, Scotch eggs, sausage rolls, all those lovely things we're known for. So yes, that's us. And then also as well, just follow me on the normal socials. I'm normally awful at promoting those, but at Marcus Bean Chef on things like Instagram and other stuff as well. So yeah, I think pretty much all that. But yeah, thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed myself.
Really good.
I better go and get in the kitchen and do some cooking.
Marcus, you've been amazing. Thank you very much, guys. And we will catch you next time. Peace out, guys. Take it easy.